on Gimel Amud Bet, and we have went through the different explanations of the problem of schach being higher than 20 amot, and we've also had an opportunity to look at one of the core debates about the minimum size of a sukkah. Is it to be able to contain your body and your head in a table, a small little tray table, which is about 7.5 tvachim by 7.5 tvachim, about 2 feet by 2 feet roughly. Or do you need it to be the size of 4 amot by 4 amot, which is Rabbi's position, about 6 feet by 6 feet. And the Gemara said when it comes to defining a house, everybody agrees, like a more permanent place, that a minimum size is 6 feet by 6 feet, as some people said, like a Manhattan studio apartment. But the question is, by a sukkah, is a sukkah defined as a temporary dwelling, and therefore, and in that way, it's a contrast to your house, because your house is permanent and your sukkah is temporary, and therefore, a smaller size suffices. Or does it have to be a substitute for your house, and therefore it also requires the 4 amot by 4 amot? Is sukkah diras keva or diras arai, permanent or temporary? A very important debate here, translated into the question of the minimum dimensions, at least width and length. Now we get to a series of sort of cases to relating to the issue of minimum height and also of maximum height, and also, as we will see, the issue of minimum height. So let's take a look, 2 lines from the bottom on Gimel Amud Bet. If the sukkah was higher than 20 amot, and you are coming to try to lower it, right? So you want to fix the problem. It's higher than 20 amot, and you want to actually lower the height. Now that's a little bit hard. Like, what do? You take off the schach, you trim the walls, you put the schach back on. So here's some interesting suggestions about how you can lower the height. So you want to lower it, with pillows and blankets. Don't lower the ceiling, raise the floor. It's a lot easier, okay? So put pillows and blankets on the floor, and then the actual height from floor to ceiling will be less, because you will remember, this is important, that we have discussed the question of whether the height is measured as the interior height or the exterior height, and because for the most part the problems of too high have been emphasizing the height of the schach, although again there have been different opinions, the assumption here is that the height is measured as the interior height, from the floor to the base of the schach. That the base of the schach cannot be higher than 20 amot. So therefore raise the floor and you will solve the problem that way. Okay, so that doesn't count. Pillows and blankets don't become part of the floor. They're like on the floor, but they don't redefine what the floor is. The afagav debatlinu, even though you've nullified them there, you stood up and you made a declaration and you said, I am making these pillows and blankets part of my floor. They're going to remain here for the whole week. No, that doesn't matter. Some have the gears of lekuluhu for the entire time. Why? A very important principle. Your intention is negated regarding that of the normal people. Normal people don't leave pillows and blankets on the floor for a week, and therefore, well, it actually is interesting because, right, in some like Mideastern cultures, right, you have like pillows like all on the floor. They basically do serve as like your the basic like carpeting essentially, and they don't really get removed. But the Gemara is assuming, I don't know, maybe it was a little bit different in a house that's out, that's especially if you have a dirt floor. Anyway, the Gemara says that that's not really it. You really don't make them part of the floor. Look, Rashi says, if you take a look at Rashi says the bottom Rashi on Gimel Amud Bet, lo have a miyut she'ein sofo laniach sham kol shiva mipnei hefsed mamono, that you're not going to really, nobody expects a normal person to leave it there for all 7. So that means that we don't really believe, or we don't treat it as significant, your desire, because normal people don't leave it there the whole week. One does wonder whether, even if you genuinely were going to, and normal people did leave it there the whole week, the point I'm making, like, if the culture is to have pillows regularly, to have like pillows on the floor and covering the floor, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are part of the floor. Meaning you could have something there for an ongoing period and intend to do that, and that could be the culture, but it doesn't mean that they get incorporated into and being seen as the floor itself. They're always seen as distinct from the floor. They're pillows on the floor. They're not the new floor. So, but for one way or another, your intention does not significant, because these either we don't really have the status of being there for the week, Or I would say further, even if they are going to be there for the weekend, that is the norm, they don't become incorporated into the floor. Now this idea, batla daito eitel kol adam, is very important. How much does halacha care about your subjective intention? How much does it care about the norms? And there are different halachot about that. But very often, if your intention, it's sometimes willing to consider your intention if it's off the chart of the norms, to be maybe more stringent, but not necessarily to be more lenient. And it has to get, sort of counterbalanced by what the norms are in that case. A good example of that is the issue of chatzitza, right? We say that if you're not makpid on something on your body, then it's not a chatzitza. Well, let's say normal people are makpid, but you, for some crazy reason, are not. Or let's say the opposite. Normal people aren't makpid, and you, for some crazy reason, are. Right? So to what degree do we look at what the norms are to determine whether it counts as a chatzitza? To what degree do we look at what your intention is? So batla daito eitzel kol adam is an important principle which is not always applied. Often it's applied to, not again, if your intention would make us more lenient and that goes against the norm, we might negate it. And that's the idea, that we look at the normal intentions and the normal way people operate and not necessarily, weigh in favor of your subjective intention. Yes, no. Okay, so that's number one. If you want to have the pillows there for the whole week, it doesn't help. It's not considered raising the floor. Tevenu beat low. Now let's say you have straw. Now, again, remember, they basically had dirt floors, and you want to now put straw. Well, that's a normal type of a thing, maybe, to actually become a type of a carpeting and actually become incorporated into the floor. So if you intentionally are mivatel it, meaning you say, I am sort of making it part of the floor, that's what mivatel means. You sort of negate it from its independent identity, and you sort of say that I'm intending to leave it there, and it's going to be part of the floor. Havimiyut, that works, that does become incorporated. V'koshkein afro bitlo, and certainly if you take dirt and you're mevatel it, again, it's a dirt floor to begin with, that becomes incorporated into the floor, and that raises the floor. Now, how about some middle cases? Teven ve'ein asid lifnoso, if you have straw that you're not like planning on removing it. In your mind, you never said, oh, let's make this part of the floor. On the other hand, you have no intentions of removing it. It's there, you haven't thought about it too much, but you certainly, or maybe you've explicitly said, yeah, I'm not going to bother taking the straw out. But you haven't like actively designated it as part of the floor. The upper stam, or you have dirt there that you haven't even thought about. You haven't decided you are taking it out, you aren't taking it out, you haven't given it a second thought. So in those cases, right, you understand why those are interesting middle cases. Because dirt is very much, but objectively and naturally, it's the same material as the floor. So it's just presence there could automatically define it as part of the floor until maybe you actively want to remove it. Okay? Or maybe not. Maybe dirt requires somehow that you indicate that you're not going to remove it. But you could understand how its natural presence could make it part of the floor. Straw is another middle case. Straw is not naturally incorporated into the floor, but it's a thing that's a reasonable thing to be part of the floor. So in that case, if you left it there stam without saying anything, so okay, maybe not. But let's say you consciously have decided you're not going to remove it. That might be enough. So how do you deal with those two cases? Is that clear? By the way, we have sort of like a chart of of degree that of your das. Bitlo means you intentionally say you want it to be part of the floor. Okay? The opposite of bitlo is atid lifnoto. You consciously are planning on removing it. Okay? Planning on removing. The two things that are in the middle of this continuum is the case about stam, okay, which is you're not thinking, no plans, you're not thinking about it, it's just there. And in asid lifnoso, which is you consciously you're planning to not remove it, right? But you haven't consciously made it part of the floor, right? You sort of see how that's a continuum, right? You are consciously planning on removing, you're consciously planning on making it out of the floor, you're not thinking about anything, you're consciously leaving it there, but you're not consciously making it part of the floor. So that's like your continuum, okay? So what it says is that if you have bitlo by plus afar and teven, that's like the best of all worlds. You've got materials that are naturally part of the floor, plus your intention, that's part of the floor. If you have it by what karim and ksatot, right? So that's even bitlo won't work. right? Even bitlo won't help you. But this, if you have something that's naturally plus your intention, the combination will work. What about these things, which your intention is somewhere in the middle range? What about that? Okay, and it says in that case, let's test it. So afar stam, which is the better material, but the slightly less better intention, or teven ve'ein asi lifnoso, the less ideal material to be part of the floor, but the better intention. Will those combinations work? Okay, is that sort of clear? If you want,
I only said the difference between
einati lifnoso means somebody brought. Part of the floor means you say, I want this. I brought in, let's say, the straw because I want to thicken my floor. I want it to be part of my floor. As opposed to somebody dropped the straw on my ground. It fell off the table. It fell on the ground. I'm just going to leave it there. Who cares? So it's not a big difference, but it's not like a conscious making it part of the floor. Okay, is that it's not a huge difference.
Can you do mulatto something for just a certain period of time?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let's say your bittul here is presumably yes, presumably for this week I want it to serve as the floor of the sukkah. Okay, all right. A way to quantify this, which is I'm not saying what the Gemara is doing, but a way to quantify this is thinking of assigning a number to like the materials and a number to the intention. What's the minimum combination of the number? Oh, I forget. Anyway, let's take a look. So the Gemara says like that. So that, if you have the combination of the two, that is machlokas Reb Yossi Rabbanan, the debate of Reb Yossi and the rabbis. Now we taught in the Mishnah. Now this is a Mishnah by Olos, by the halacha that. By the way, Tosas interestingly says it's not really a Mishnah by Olos. It's a paraphrase and a sort of a rewriting of a Mishnah to get to in order to make it more accessible and relevant, which is interesting. Like Tosas points out how what we're about to quote is not a text of a Mishnah, but it's inferred from the Mishnah. And since the Mishnah was a lot more complicated, the Gemara actually just rewrote the Mishnah in a way that was directly applicable here, which is sometimes you feel, I wish it would do that more often. But anyway, okay. But what is the idea? By Olos, the idea is that if you have tumah, let's say a dead body, and it's under a roof, then the tumah is considered to hit the roof and to spread, and it stays within the house. Okay, that's a tumah of a corpse. However, if there's not a tefach between the floor and the roof, less than a tefach, then it's like there's no roof and the tumah bursts through and goes straight up. That's from like planes flying over cemeteries and so on. Okay, so it's not in the house, but it's anything directly above the corpse is a problem. So let's say you've got a tefach, but then you fill dirt up in the gap here. Does that change the sense of the gap between the floor and the roof? The same question here, but here the issue is to determine whether you have a tefach gap. So let's take a look what the Mishnah says. Bayis shemiluhu teven otzrorot. A house. You actually had a corpse in a house, and you filled the entire house with straw or with rocks. Rocks is effectively the same as the dirt. Ubitlo. And you negated it there. Mivutal, it's batel, and it becomes part, and therefore it's not. You no longer have an ohel, and it has all those relevant halachot. So that's bittul plus the straw and the rocks. That's the easy case. So now the Gemara comments, bitlo in lo bitlo lo. So according to the author of that Mishnah, only active bittul plus the good materials works. Anything less than active bittul would not work. The Tanya Allah, but we have a breita on this. Reb Yossi Omer, Teven ve'ein asi lifnoso, hareyu ka'afar stam ubatel. If you have straw and you're planning to not remove it, then that's equivalent to dirt that you have no intention. Those are two middle cases, and both of those work, and they are batel. As long as you have a really good material like dirt, then even no das works. And if you have a pretty good material like straw, then planning on leaving it there, that also works. And you don't need active das to be mevatel.
It's a type of gilui das, no?
No. It's defining the nature of the object based on the physical reality of the floor and the object and how much they incorporate into one another, plus your intention.
But if you put soil on a soil floor, it's not an...
No. First of all, you didn't necessarily put it. Your kid maybe spilled it there. You didn't give it... You haven't even been thinking about it. You're away at work. You don't even know it's there yet. So it's not about a giloi das. It's about the combination of your das and the reality and the physical reality. That's the way I would understand it. Okay. Now, Areu kafars. Now, afar v'asi lifno. So, however, if the intentions are not as ideal, you have afar. True, it's the best material, but it's higher up on the sort of intention continuum. Your plan is to remove it. Areu kistam teven. Then that's equivalent to a case of straw, a less ideal material, and no intention, also less ideal intention, the low batel, and it is not good. So what Rabbi Yossi says is, Chachamim say you always need bit low to make it part of the floor. What Rabbi Yossi says is these two cases are good. The best material with a somewhat okay intention, or the second best material with a better intention. Those two are good. However, if you moved them up one, right? If you had the upper and you were planning on removing it, or the tevin and it had no intention, then it would not be good. But in that case, they work. Okay, so that's seeing the way in which you can raise the floor based on the material and based on your intention. Now, I want to say one thing before we continue. You might notice that the structure of this Gemara is a little strange. It doesn't start with quoting a Braita. It doesn't start with an Amora saying, I'm a Rebbe, like I'm a Rebbe Avo, here's the halacha. It's just the anonymous voice of the Gemara saying a halachic statement. Normally the anonymous voice is the one that's weaving together the voices of the, Tanoim and the Amoraim, or maybe it's introducing a Mishnah or a Braita in order to then have the statements of the Amoraim, but it's not usually, it's like, you don't have normally like the Gemara saying like, okay, in this case, here's the halacha. In this case, this is the case. In this case, so what's going on here? So if you take a look, it's an interesting Rashi. Look at the second Rashi from the bottom on Gimel Amud Bet. Rashi says the following: Haisa gavo me esrim, says Rashi, piskei shmu otain. These are like sort of, psakim, rulings of discussions, like bottom line conclusions. In current scholarly language, it might be somewhat apodictic, okay, as opposed to discursive. So Rashi attributes it to Ravashi because for Rashi, Ravashi is the sort of editor of the Gemara. Currently, academically, we sort of assigned, it's assumed to be later. But the point still is, whoever did the editing of the Gemara, these were like traditions of psakim. And actually is not the no-named Amora. This was like consensus and traditions of psakim that were passed down, and that these were just presented in a much more apodictic type of a form. Okay, so one was raising the floor. Now back to the Gemara. Now we're going to deal with other related types of cases. Okay, Haisa Gavoa Asarat Tvachim. Now what we're going to I'm sorry, I skipped down a line. Now it's higher than 20 amot, so again we've got a problem. But here's how we might lower the height. And you have like twigs coming in within 20. So again, it's clear from this you measure to the bottom of the schach. Okay, so your gap from the floor to the schach is 20 amot. But now from the schach you got some you've got like some extensions that are hanging within 20. Is that considered to be the new bottom of the schach? Right. So is that clear? Just draw my case. Here's your sukkah. It's a really high sukkah. Okay. Here's your floor. Okay. So you've got here 20 amot, or whatever. We'll call it 21. Okay. That's your height. But then here's your schach. And then what you have some stuff that's hanging down from the schach. And if you were to measure from the bottom of this, then it would only be 20. Okay. So is that okay? Do you go from where the main schach is, or do you go from where the bottom hanging of the schach is? Okay, so so if the extended hang itself provides more shade than sunlight, so then it is considered to be the schach proper, because it by itself could create enough shade. But if not, it doesn't count as schach. So the halacha is, were you to remove this schach and the stuff that's now hanging and that gets to be within 20, right? If this itself could provide sufficient shade, then you're good. But if actually it itself is not providing sufficient shade, then you can't count it the schach. Only this is the schach, and the schach is too high.
That's
all right?
A lot of stuff hanging down.
Well, I made it 20 and 21. You could have made it that it was that this height was 20.1, and it only has to hang down 0.1. Okay, but the point is, but you mean a lot of stuff in terms of the the actual distribution, not just a lot of length.
Yeah,
right, that is correct. You got
The picture
pictures.
book has it.
Fine. Anyway, you got to. Okay. All right. So you need that stuff that gets to within 20 to continue to be considered to be schach. Going on. Now we're dealing with maximum height. We're going to deal with minimum height. If it was only 10 tfachim high, now we have a case where it's the reverse. You don't want to lower the schach. It's 10 tfachim high, and the strands that are hanging down go within 10 tfachim. So if you consider that to be schach, now it's too small. So what's the halacha? So Rabbi Lameimar, so Rabbi thought it was the same basic principle applied in this case. Im chamsan meruba mitzilatan, if there's more sun than shade in that extended hang, so kshera, it's kosher, because then it doesn't count as schach, and otherwise, then obviously it would be too small of a height. But if the stuff hanging down does not provide enough shade, then it doesn't count, and you have a minimum height. Amalei Rava said, no. Hadira sruchahi, that's a smelly, literally a habitat. You cannot live in a smelly habitat. Now, smelly is not technically the point, but it means like spoiled or whatever. It's inhabitable is basically what Rava is saying. He's saying, look, 10 tfachim already is pushing it. How are you supposed to live in a place that's only like 2 feet high? So maybe you can if you're always lying down. Okay, but it's pushing it. But not only that you can only lie down and you have your roof right here, but you got little strands of schach falling into your face, that's inhabitable. So technically it might be minimum height. I'm not invalidating it because of the height issue. I'm invalidating it because it's inhabitable. Tosfos, of course, says, and otherwise it wasn't inhabitable. Tosfos, what type of a place can you live in that you can't stand up in? Meaning, I've been explaining you don't have to sit up to eat. You can recline to eat. But Tosfos, what type of a habitation is it that you can't stand up straight in? Anyway, this makes it completely inhabitable. All right. Back to being too high. It was higher than 20 amot. Now you built a platform. Opposite the middle wall. If you take a look, actually, got a nice little picture in the Gemara itself. And basically, normally the Gemara assumes that a sukkah has 3 walls, doesn't assume 4 walls. So you've got 3 walls, and you built this platform opposite along the length of the middle wall. So if you think about it, if that platform, above that platform, the platform is high enough that above that platform is, you've raised the floor, is less than 20 amot. So that area around the platform is the right height, and that area around the platform has 3 walls, right? Half of the left and the right wall and all of the back wall. So that area above the itztaba itself is a kosher sukkah.
This is an aerial view.
This is an aerial view, okay? I think the picture is pretty clear, right? So al pnei kula, the length of the entire, opposite wall, v'yesh b'hechsher sukkah, and the area above the platform is the minimum size of a sukkah. So then you've got a sukkah there. The whole area of the platform is surrounded by 3 walls, and it's not high, and it's not too high. It's perfect. Kshera, it is kasher. Okay, so that's clear, right? Why that works. That's a pretty straightforward case. Rashi, by the way, makes a chiddush that not only is the platform kasher, but the rest of the sukkah is also kasher. And this becomes an interesting question, which is, if you have a part of the sukkah that's kasher, do you see the rest of the sukkah as somehow just an adjunct to the part that's kasher? Now, normally we would say no, if the problem was the schach. Like imagine that I have a little strip of kasher schach, and the rest is covered with metal bars. When I say, I can be under the metal bars because this piece of the sukkah is kosher. The answer would be no. Normally we say it when the problem is the walls. Let's say I've got a kosher sukkah here, and then the schach extends outwards, but the walls don't follow the schach. So, and I sit under the schach. So I'm sitting under kosher schach. It doesn't have walls. There we would say, okay, but I'm under kosher schach, and it's part of that sukkah over there that has walls. That's okay. That would be a normal scenario where would say you could sit in the non-kosher part and you're considered part of the kosher part when you have kosher schach but you don't have walls. That's what the case the Gemara deals with. Rashi applies that here, which is interesting because it raises the question: is the too high sukkah a problem of the schach or a problem of the walls? If it's a problem of the walls, then you could say even in the other part of the sukkah, that's not the platform, I'm under kosher schach, I'm just not in the walls of the sukkah, but that's okay, I'm an extension, I'm a connected. That seems to be how Rashi is saying it, but the alternative is to say the schach is invalid, and then the rest of the sukkah wouldn't be kosher. So I don't know if I just lost everybody there, but I want you to appreciate what?
You're not connected, you're on a different level.
Yeah, but it's all the extension of the same walls and the extension of the same schach. Anyway, the Gemara here says that it's kosher. Rashi adds the chiddush that not only is on top of the platform kosher, but even the extension is kosher. And all I'm telling you is that's not so pashut. And it might depend on whether it's you see the problem being in the walls or the problem being in the schach. Okay, so that's that case. Now, how about uminat tzad? Let's say you built your platform lengthwise of the sukkah. Again, look at that picture. And so that picture, you can see you only have two exterior walls, correct? The thing going down in the middle isn't the wall. The thing going down in the middle is the edge of the platform. So in that case, you only have two exterior walls, right? You got a problem. So what do? If there's 4 amot separating the platform and the far wall, then it's invalid because you only have 2 walls. But less than 4 amot is valid. Why? So this is a principle, one of the important principles we're going to learn in Sukkah called Dofen Akuma. Dofen meaning wall and Akuma meaning bent. Okay, which I basically translate as the magic bending wall. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of magic here. Okay, now how does the magic bending wall work? The way the magic bending wall works is, let's say you've got a house, which you've got your permanent, well, maybe that looks like schach. Anyway, you've got your permanent roof here. Okay, that's your roof. You've got your house, and we're going to have this case in a minute. But then a section of your roof falls in. Okay, and you say, oh, a section fell in, perfect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with schach. Okay, I'm going to fill it with schach, and I'm going to make the area underneath my kosher sukkah. There's only a bit of a problem, which is the area directly underneath has no walls, adjacent to it, right? The walls are distant. So the principle of the magic bending wall says, if the distance from the schach to the real wall is less than 4 amot, then we can say that this schach isn't schach. Not the schach. This roof isn't roof. This roof is actually just a bent wall. And therefore, what the roof here is it's actually you've got one bent wall going that way, and if this is less than 4 amot, you've got another bent wall going that way, and I think you get the idea. Right? And if these things are considered to be bent walls, the roof is a bent wall, so then this space in the middle, if that's less than 4 amot, you can look at the roof as a bent wall and say it has adjacent walls. Is that pretty clear what we're saying here?
Impressive that you could draw that.
Thank you. Anyway, so what the Gemara is saying in this case is, if you've got here your sukkah, which is too high, but you got your platform, okay? And your platform makes it. This is that here. This is this is less than 20 amot. That's your platform. But you've only got 2 walls there. There's no wall here. You've only got 2 walls. It says no problem, because if from here to here is less than 4 amot, then this wall, right? This wall is higher than 20. Whatever. This wall here, which is too far away, right? But you have schach. Well, the only problem was that it was higher than 20, right? So this wall bends all the way here if this distance is less than 4, and therefore this actually will have 3 walls. All right.
That it bends over the top, or actually the way I read it is that this is not just a magic bending wall; it's a magic bending wall that can be invisible.
No.
Because the scarf doesn't even have to touch the wall through the bending wall.
We will get to invisible later, but now let's assume everything touches and we're just bending it, okay? We'll deal later with the fact that you also have, that's the other magic. And then there's a question if you can combine 2 magic principles, okay? About 6 feet. Okay, so, right. So if the point here is the white space, which is higher than 20, if that white space, the distance from the edge to the other opposite wall is less than 4, then you use the schach on top of that white space to pull the wall, to extend the wall so it's touching, so it's connected to the schach above the platform. Okay, so that's the principle. So the Gemara says, "My kamash malan, what are you teaching me? Damrin and dofen akuma, that you say a principle of a bent wall? Tanina, we taught it. Bayis shenifchas v'sichich al gabav. If a house has the case I gave you, the roof, a middle part of the roof fell in, and you put schach in the middle in that part that fell in. If there's the distance from the actual wall to the schach part is 4 amot or more, it's invalid. Hapachos mikan, implicitly it's telling you that less than that, kshera, it's kosher. So you do this bending wall by the schach in the middle of your roof, so of course you would do the bending wall here with the platform and to get the wall to be considered connected. So the Gemara says no. Maud te'ima, I might have thought, hasim hu dechaz yeludofen. There, the wall is the right height. It's just not close enough. Right? If you've got the wall and the middle of your roof fell in, the walls are good walls, halachic walls for a sukkah. They're just not close enough to the area of the schach. So we bend the roof to bring them close to the schach. But here, in this case, this wall, there's no platform in this section. This wall is a 21 amma wall. You might say this wall doesn't count by wall. By bending it, we're not only bringing it close to the kosher sukkah, we're redefining it as the right height wall. Right? If it gets bent and placed here, its height will be defined from the top of the platform. Right? Over here, it's a 21 amma wall. After we've bent it and effectively moved it here, not only have we made it join to the sukkah, but we actually have now made it into a right-sized wall. So maybe you're not allowed to do that. Maybe you have to start with the proper-sized wall. Okay, Hasamu dechaz yeludofen. There, it's fit for being a wall. It's only it's just too far away from the middle, from the schach in the middle of your roof. Aval hacha delo chaz yeludofen. Here, where it is, it's not fit for a wall. It's 21 amot. It's not. Wow. It's too high. Aim a low. I might think that you can't bend it, which means both effectively bringing it close and making it the right height. Kamash Milan, that's okay. You can do it. And as long as it's within 4 amot, you can see it as juxtaposed, you can see it as contiguous, and therefore it also transforms. Now its height has shrunk because now it's next to a platform, so its effective height is less. Yes.
So within the right amount of distance, what's the difference between Dofen Akuma and Gud Asik?
So that's the point about the invisible. Gud Asik is you have a wall that's not high enough. But once it's 10 tfachim high, it's imagined to continue to go up straight. That's the other magic. So why did we put it there? There's a couple, but the two major ones are Dofen Akuma and Gud Asik Mechitzta. Good asik means the wall goes up. Sometimes it's good asik mechitzta, but anyway, means good is the wall, asik goes up, which means if you start with a 10 tefach wall and you've got your schach up here, right, and it's not touching at the vertical plane, right, as opposed to not touching because at the horizontal, so then the wall is continued to extend straight up. Okay, so this is sort of, the magic.
So can you do both?
Not bending wall. So no. So that's combining.
Because then you wouldn't have to buy anything.
I know, that's combining two magic principles. That's what I said, right? This is the magic invisible wall, or it's just the invisible wall. It's like
I'm gonna find a way.
Okay. So this is getting the walls close at the horizontal. This is at the horizontal combined. It's all about combining the walls to the schach, right? This is combining them on the horizontal plane, and this is combining them on the vertical plane. Okay, in both cases, the problem is that the walls don't touch the schach. This is the vertical, and this is the horizontal, and you're bringing them close on those different planes. Okay, but whenever I talk about this, I always remember that scene from Spaceballs, where do you remember that they're all running and they bump into and they bang into something that's you can't see it. What is it? It says, oh, that's an invisible wall. Oh, that's an invisible wall. I always want to know what an invisible wall looks like. So anyway, yes.
You combine either of these with Lavu.
What?
Can you combine
Yeah,
them?
that's we'll worry about all of that.
Okay.
All right. So the Gemara says like this. Okay. Now, okay. Hayisa Gavoa me esrim amma. It was higher than 20 amot. Ubana itztaba be'imtzeita. You built a platform in the middle. Now it's really like the case of the schach in the middle of the roof. So you have to bend all four walls or all three walls. If the distance from the platform to the other wall to the walls is 4 amot, then you can't bend them. It's invalid. However, if it's within 4 amot of 3 of the walls, right? You need 3 walls. So it's if the distance between it and three separate walls in 3 separate directions is less than 4 amot, then you bend those 3 walls and you have the walls juxtaposed, or contiguous with the schach. So the Gemara says, "My kamashmalan, what are you telling me? That mean in Dofen Akuma that we bend walls? I know it's what you just said." It says, "No, I might have thought Dofen Akuma meiruach achas amrinan. You can say 1 wall you can bend. Maybe you can't bend it for all 3 walls, all 3 directions. Kamashmalan that yes, you can do it on multiple walls." Okay. Haisa, now we get to not maximum height, but minimum height. Yes.
I'm sorry. So does that mean that if you've got like a patch of schach in the middle,
Yeah.
open air on all 4 sides?
No. Good question. To bend the wall, you need real schach.
Exactly.
Meaning what allows you to bend the wall is that the schach, the physical material of the schach, is considered to be part of the physical wall. Right? And that was your question about doing it with the invisible things. You can't. Okay, you need to actually need physical material to bend, and it allows you to envision the roof as part of the wall. But you actually need the physical matter.
You can imagine the stuff also.
Right, exactly. Okay. Okay, so it's less than 10 tvachim. It's too small. And now what you are doing is you are going to dig into the floor in order to get, you're going to lower the floor. Okay? So you dig a hole. Now, here's the problem. The problem is now we get to introduce Lovewood. Okay? Here's your sukkah. Okay? It's very short. Okay? This is 9 tfachim. And what you did was here in the ground, okay, we'll remove that. Here in the ground, in the middle, this is sort of like the reverse of, right here in the middle of the ground, you dug a hole. Okay? So you've got now, from the floor here, from the floor of your hole to the top, you've got 10 tfachim. But you've got a problem. What's your problem? That kosher sukkah is not touching the walls. Again, you dug your hole in the middle, right? So right here there's a minimum height, right? But the walls are distant. So what would you say you would need in order to get the walls to be considered adjacent? You think less than 4 amot. Let's see what the Gemara says. It seems like we're getting ready to say the same thing. But if from the edge of the pit ulakoto gimel tfachim, if it's less than 3 tfachim, psula, it's invalid. I'm sorry, if it's 3 tfachim or more, it's invalid. Less than 3 tfachim, it is kasher. So now the Gemara asks the obvious question. By the way, you'll notice not one Tana nor one Amora has been, it's completely the anonymous voice of the Gemara. Okay, the only Tana was mentioned was when it brought in a Mishnah. Why, when you've got a section in the middle that's too high, you say less than 4 amot, up to 4 amot, you can bend in the walls. And why here does it have to be 3 tfachim, which is radically less, right? It's about, 5 inches or something. So and the other is like 6 feet. So the Gemara says no. Hasam the isa l'dofen. There you start with the wall. Pachas me arba amos, less than 4 amos is fine because you can continue to bend the wall. Hacha here, lishvuye dofen. You don't have a wall yet. Less than 10 tfachim is not only invalid as a sukkah. Less than 10 tfachim is also the minimum height for what? A halachic wall. A mechitza for a wall, for like Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos. Other areas you need a wall. So if it starts with this thing, if these walls are only 9 tfachim high, You can't bend them to get them here. They're not yet halachically a wall. The same way when you have the magic, rising wall, it's only once that wall is 10 tfachim can you imagine it to go up. You need to start with a wall. So if you start with a wall, but it's 21 amot, you can bend it. But here it's only 9 tfachim, so therefore you can't bend that wall. So you can't have the principle of the magic bending wall. What principle do you have? You have a principle of lavud. If that's less than 3 tfachim, lavud is a principle that without any bending, things are just considered to be contiguous if they're within 3 tfachim of one another. Okay? So that's why if it's less than 3, then it literally is like it's right up against the wall. Right? I mean, let me give you an example. Right? Let's say it was a centimeter removed. Right? Would you say, well, you don't have a wall, 10 tfachim, because it's centimeter off. Or we say, no, that's effectively, it's the same thing. It's like it's connected. So lavud is a little bit more than a centimeter. It's 5 inches, but it means within 3 tfachim, it's considered like it's all right next to each other. And you don't need it to have a status of a wall. You're not saying a bending wall. Any two things that are within 3 tfachim are like they're connected to one another.
10 tfachim is about 3 feet.
Is about 30 inches. Or 3 feet, something like that. Okay, so hacha lishvuye dof, and here you're turning it into a wall. You're trying to get the minimum 10 tfachim. Pachas mishloel tfachim in, less than 3 tfachim, yes. Ilo, lo. If not, not. Now, I want to say 2 things at this stage. First of all, what does the word lavud mean? I mean, I think effectively, like I said, it means that it's considered contiguous. But if you look at Rashi, Rashi says the following. Rashi says, second line from the top, lavud, says Rashi in the middle of the line, snif. It's an appendage, an extension. I have no idea what that is. Think about like your table when you put in an extension into your table, a leaf, right? So today the saneif chakak al chakak. It's like you extended a ditch onto your ditch. So basically you're allowed to like extend the thing up to 3 tfachim. That's the way Rashi says the word lavud itself means, and it's a virtual extension of the thing that you're dealing with. So that up to 3 tfachim it's considered to extend and therefore make them to actually be contiguous. But that's the idea of lavud within 3 tfachim is contiguous. Now I want to say another interesting point, which is that Tosfos says we don't say this by Shabbat. By Shabbat, there's an exact similar case, and it says if you dig a hole here in the middle of your whatever, and there's walls. I mean, let's not make it a hat, whatever. And there's, let's say, whatever, and you dig your little hole, and it's 5 tfachim, and there's a wall here. There's walls around it that are only 5 tfachim. Okay, so that inside this hole by Shabbos is a reshut hayachid. Okay, so it's the same idea, right? 5 tfachim plus 5 tfachim make 10 tfachim. But Tosfos says, but we don't need it to be within 3 tfachim of the walls. Why not? What's the difference? How come for Shabbos it's reshut hayachid, even though, I mean, you need 3 directions. But anyway, how come by Shabbos it's reshut hayachid, even if it's not contiguous to the walls, and here it isn't? And Tosfos says a very important point. He says, by Shabbos, you don't need the idea of a house. By Sukkah, you need the idea of a house. So a house, the walls are contiguous with the living space. So that's, right? Is that clear? So therefore you need it to be contiguous. Whereas by Shabbos, the idea is if this is a zone that is sort of separated off, protected from the outside, what does a mechitza do? Mechitza blocks traffic, right? So even if the mechitza, the blocking of the traffic occurs distant, but this zone in the middle is a protected zone, that makes it reshut hayachid. It doesn't need walls contiguous. It's not a structure with walls. The idea of reshut hayachid is a protected zone. So the walls that actually protect can be distant from the space itself that is designated as a reshut hayachid. Okay, so I just thought that was very interesting because although they're very similar, walls, 10 tfachim, and so on, there's a difference. A sukkah has a roof, and a sukkah is more of a whole structure. The walls are part of the structure, whereas by reshut hayachid, the walls more protect the space in the middle. Okay, let's keep on going. Okay.
Reshut is a more abstract concept.
That's true also. Right, exactly. Exactly. It's not a dwelling place, it's abstract, and therefore the walls don't have to be an integral part of it. Now, it's higher than 20 amot. Now, you built in the middle a platform higher than 10 tfachim. Now, we're not going to be able to bend the walls, okay? But we're going to try to do something, because let's say it's way too big to bend the walls, and your platform is in the middle. but we're going to do something else. V'yesh bo hechsher sukkah, and on this platform is the minimum size of a sukkah. So savar abai l'meimar, and here becomes the other magic principle, good asik mechitzta, the wall extends up, the mechitza of the wall extends up. So you got the case, meaning now what you've got is the same idea of a platform in the middle, but with one new thing added. The size of the platform, here's you standing on the platform, the size of the platform is 10 tfachim, okay? And you've got way here, you've got, your schach that's too high, okay? And this is way too far away from the walls. It's 5 amot away from the walls, so you're not going to be able to bend, okay? But from here to the top is good. So what Abai said is, hey, let's extend the walls, the magic extending walls. Since the platform is 10 tfachim, the outer wall of the platform, even though it doesn't have an interior part, right, but just the outer face of the platform can be a wall that extends up, and therefore you could be okay. So we got somebody shaking his head no. Let's see, Rava doesn't like it either. Let's see what Rava says. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Amalei Rava says to him, "Be'inan mechitzas hani karot v'leka." No, you need walls that are obviously walls. Now, why are these not obviously walls? Well, right. You could say two things. You could say because they're invisible, okay? Or you could say, and that raises questions, when do we ever say good asik? Or you could say, no, because when you look at it, it's like there's nothing, right? It's only like a wall on one side. It has no interior. And something like this, which is the face of something, is not really a wall. All right? So let's take a look how this plays out.
It's above the floor level.
Well, but it's a foundation.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Right. It doesn't start also at your level. You don't see it. So we're going to test what nikarot means by the next case. Let's take a look. So the Gemara says like this. Tanu Rabbanan, we taught. Na'atz kaneh, na'atz arba kundesim, v'sichei gaban. You made 4 posts on your rooftop, and you put schach on them. So you're on your roof, and there are 4 posts, and you put schach from post to covering the whole thing, but there's absolutely no walls. Rabbi Yaakov says it's kosher. The Chachamim poslim, and the Chachamim say it's invalid. Now, let's take a look. Amar Rav Huna, machlokas al sfas hagag. The debate is at the edge of the roof. The Rabbi Yaakov savar amrinan good asik mechitzta, the wall goes up. For Rabbanan savar lo amrinan good asik mechitzta, the wall doesn't go up. So that's a very similar scenario, right? Which is, here you are, you're on your rooftop. This is your Manhattan apartment building or whatever. You're on your rooftop. You make these poles, right? And you put schach on it. So Rabbi Yaakov says the wall goes up. The wall of the building goes up. Okay, now is this the same case as the platform? Right? If you say this is good, will this be good? This is a little bit better. Why is this better?
These are walls.
Because these are real walls. These have an interior, right? They're invisible to you on the top, but they are nikarot, not to you on the top. They're totally invisible, but they're nikarot because it's not just the face of something. There actually is a wall. There actually is an interior to this. So that's how we're going to test what is this idea of mechitzot hanikarot. Okay, but that's this case of will we extend the walls of the apartment building? Yes.
What about the requirement to put a fence around the top of the roof?
Let's not worry about that. Okay. It's not your building. You don't have that requirement. I don't know. All right. So the Gemara says like this. Good question. The Gemara says like this. Okay, so he says the debate is at the edge of the building. If the posts were in the middle of the roof, obviously be invalid. How could anybody say you have a wall? So according to this, the Chachamim would say that even to use the edge of the building to say the extending wall, you would not say. Rav Nachman says, no, they debate in the middle of the roof. Because middle of the roof, how could Rabbi Yaakov say it's good? We'll get to that in a minute. But what he's saying is, if it's at the edge of the roof, everybody would say you could extend the wall. So the Gemara says, Ibaylu. They raise the question according to Rav Nachman. The Emsagag Machlokas, is it only the debate is in the middle of the roof? But by the edge of the roof, everybody would say it's good? Everybody would extend the wall? Odilma, or do we say bein bezu machlokas, that they're actually debating both cases? That the Chamim would say not only the middle of the roof is no good for obvious reasons, but even the edge of the roof, we won't extend the wall. So the Gemara says, Teiku, we don't know. But basically, what you have here is that, according to one opinion, they're debating the edge of the roof. And even there, the Chachamim say you don't extend the wall. So even that is not enough nikarot, because it's not nikar to the people, because it's not nikar to the guy standing up here. According to the other version, maybe they debate the middle of the roof, and maybe only the middle of the roof, and maybe the edge of the roof, everybody would agree, is okay, and would say that this is better than this case. Here, at least, the walls are evident below. Here, the walls are not really evident to anyone. Okay, so what exactly is the parameters of evident to you or evident to anyone, is part of what's going on
And
here.
you're saying when it's in the middle of the roof, you cannot apply both good asa
You can't
and
both.
dofen
Correct.
akuma.
Absolutely
That
not.
would solve the problem.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So the Gemara says like this. Meisvei. Now we're not done. I'll ask you. Not arba kundasim ba'aret. You put 4 posts on the ground. V'sichach gaban. You put schach on them. Rabbi Yaakov Makir. Rabbi Yaakov says it's fine. V'chamim posting v'chamim invalidate. So the Gemara says v'ha'aretz. If it's on the ground, kemsa gagdam. It's like the middle of the roof, right? It means there's no way to use any extending walls. And nevertheless, Rabbi Yaakov says that even 4 posts with no extending walls is still kosher. The Kamachya Rabbi Yaakov, and Rabbi Yaakov says it's kosher. So you see that even in the middle of the roof, Rabbi Yaakov is willing to still say it's kosher. They're not just debating the edge of the roof. Tiyufta to Rav Huna tiyufta. Okay, that's a contradiction to Rav Huna. Rav Huna said they're only debating the edge. Nobody would say it's kosher in the middle. Here we see it's not true. We see that Rabbi Yaakov says even without the extending wall, it's kosher. Now the Gemara wants to push its case even more. Maybe I'll say they're only debating the middle of the roof. They're only debating this case of like being on the ground. Maybe I should infer that by the edge of the roof, maybe everybody would say it's okay, that you can say the extending wall. Maybe this contradicts Rav Huna in 2 ways. A, that Rav Yaakov says it's good at the, even in the middle, and Rav Huna denied that. And the second way is that maybe Rav Yaakov agrees that the Chachamim agree that the edge of the roof is good, and that was also being denied. So Amalacha Rav Huna will tell you no. Just because they debate the middle of the roof, the case of the ground, does not mean that they don't also debate the edge of the roof. Why are they discussing the middle of the roof? To tell you the chiddush of Rav Yaakov, that he says it's fine even in the middle of the roof. Which means what? That we see that they debate the case of the ground. We see that Rav Yaakov says that even without extending walls, it's okay. The Chachamim say it's no good. Okay? Now, first of all, I should say a word about why, we'll say in a minute with the logic of Rabbi Yaakov.
Right.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But you see they debate on the ground, so that Rabbi Yaakov has a very bizarre position, it's okay, it's very logical, Chachamim say it's no good. What about when it's at the edge of the roof? Clearly, of course, Rabbi Yaakov is going to continue to say it's okay. Would the Chachamim there say it's good or not? That's not clear. Maybe they would say it's good. Okay? Maybe they would say the extending wall. Maybe they say it's no good. But the reason we're focusing on the case of the middle of the roof is because it tells you the tremendous chiddush of Rabbi Yaakov, that even without any extending walls, he's going to make this kosher. Okay? So Chachamim who disagree might also not even like the edge of the roof. That we don't know. But we do know that Rabbi Yaakov goes so far to say without any walls, just the 4 posts, it's going to be fine. And let's figure out why, and that's the last piece. Tana Rabbanan, a rabbi taught, not arba kundasim ba'aretz, 4 posts in the ground, v'sichich al gabam, and you put schach on them. Rabbi Yaakov omer roim, now here's the explanation of Rabbi Yaakov. Kol she'ilu yachaku, if those poles are big enough that you could carve them, v'yachlaku, and split them, v'yesh ben tefach lekan v'tefach lekan, and there's a tefach in each direction, nidoni mishum diomed. They have a status of diomed, which means like a corner. V'im lav eini doni mishum diomed, and if not, they don't count as a corner. Shahaya Reb Yaakov Omer diyom de sukkah tefach, that the corners of a sukkah are a tefach. V'chachamim omim ad yushtaim kil chatzim shlishis afilu tefach. Now you need 2 full walls. The last one can be a tefach, which means what? Which means that if you have 4 posts, right? This is now an aerial view. You've got 4 posts, but they're big enough that you can cut out a square of a tefach of a tefach. And then from that square of a tefach, you can actually imagine hollowing it out. So effectively, they are big enough that you can create 4 corners, each one a tefach by a tefach. And he says that creates a structure, a frame of 4 walls. And that frame of 4 walls, although you don't actually have the physical wall, is enough to be kosher for a sukkah. That's called a diomed. Now, by the way, people who remember Eruvin might remember the case of Pasi Birot, that you have a well in the middle and you've got corners there. The corners have to be an amma long. Here, it's a smaller structure. A tefach is enough. So he says, if you did this, it would be kosher, and therefore, even if you don't have the corners, even if you just have posts, if they could, in theory, become those corners, that would be fine.
So you can, according to him, imagine the corners.
Yes.
And from that, then imagine the wall.
Exactly. And the Chacham, so it is a double chiddush. And the Chachamim say, even if you had the corners, it wouldn't be good. You need 2.5 real walls. Okay, but the upshot of all of this is, we've got a huge chiddush here about the Yondin, but we have the principle about the magic bending wall. We have the principle about the magic extending wall, okay, which is the good asik. And the point is, to say good asik, you need something to be 10 tfachim. You got to start. You also need to start with a real wall. And the question is, what about the question about mechitzot nikarot? And we had 2 scenarios about mechitzot nikarot. We had one which is a platform, and they're not obvious to anyone. That Rava says is no good. We have the other, which is it's a building, and it is an obvious wall to the people in the building, just not to the guy on top. And that was the question, whether the Chachamim would say that this case is good or not. Would the Chachamim say the case of the roof is good? Can you say the extending wall, when the wall is nikar to the people in the building, but completely invisible to the guy on top? And we don't have an answer to that question. Okay, and that's where we'll end with today.
According to Rabbi Yaakov, if the poles are thick enough,
Yeah.
you can make a